Hello, my name is Colin Park from the University of Derby. I'm here today to show you how to set up the K12 Multi Jib, made by Hague Camera Support Systems. The first thing you do is find the spider dolly, or tripod dolly, and unlock the three wheels. The lock provides a lock for the rotation of the wheel and also the swiveling of the wheel, and you will probably need to unlock them before you can hinge out any of the legs. Now the legs are held in position with a locating pin on each leg located in a hole. When you loosen, and I say loosen, don't remove the nut completely, just loosen it and the leg can be hinged out so that pin locates itself in the hole that expands that leg, and tighten the nut again like so. It's exactly the same with the other leg. Loosen, don't remove it completely, ease it out, hinge it into position, and it is very important to make sure that those pins are actually located in those holes. Obviously this leg here stays in that position. So once you've actually reached this point here, you are ready to put it on the floor. Just before I put it on the floor, I should mention, never ever be tempted to put any weight in the middle. This triangular plate will bend here. The weight is distributed evenly to the three wheels. So when you put the tripod on the floor, like so, lock all the wheels again and make sure they are locked in place, like so. The other thing you need to make sure is that these securing clips for the tripod are facing outwards, like so, ready to accept the tripod. So the next thing to find in the kit is the tripod. It's a fairly standard tripod. This particular tripod has a 75mm diameter bowl, which is very important and will become apparent shortly. So I'm going to put the tripod on the spider dolly, one leg at a time. You can see there is a clawed foot that fits on the bar of each of the spider legs, like so. The next thing you need to do is to push down on each leg in turn to counteract the pulling up of the rubber clip that keeps the foot in place. So push down and pull up the rubber clip on each of the legs, and you will end up with a firm base ready to accept the jib arm. So the next thing you need to find is the actual counterbalance arm, which incorporates the pivot point. Kit here at the University of Derby comes pre-assembled to a point. So the pivot point, the counterbalance arm, is actually one piece. You will see that when I took this out of the kit today, the sliding weight is actually at the extreme end where all the weights will eventually end up. Well, we don't want all that weight to be on that extreme end. So if we slide this weight to be nearer the pivot point, so when it ends up on the tripod, there won't be as much weight on that end. So the next thing you do is to loosen and indeed take off completely this nut here at the bottom of the pivot point. Now, it's best to put this in your pocket actually, so that when you connect this to the tripod, you know where it is, you can secure it again. Now there is a washer there on the bottom, and you see it's got a concave surface. That's got a concave surface. Now that actually mates up underneath the tripod bowl when it's connected to the tripod. So I'm going to put this in my pocket for the time being. Now, do you remember I mentioned with the top of the tripod there was a 75mm diameter bowl? Well, here, bottom of the pivot point, you have a raised area, a raised inner area, which is 75mm, that fits in the tripod bowl. There is actually a larger 100mm raised area if we had a larger tripod. Our tripod has a 75mm bowl. So, I would recommend that you have help when you do this, but today, in the convenience of a studio, we have a table here to support this end. So I offer the pivot point to that tripod, like so, and you can actually hear and you can actually see that fit into place. So that 75mm raised area has actually mated up with the 75mm bowl successfully, and you can check that. So having secured that in place, placed it in place, I'm now going to secure it with that concave washer that goes underneath, and the hand nut that screws up on the bottom, and secure it in place like so. As I say, it's extremely convenient to be in a studio today and be able to support that end on a table. If you are on location somewhere and you don't have the convenience of a table, well then obviously you have to delegate your crew, you have to delegate someone to be supporting this while you assemble the rest of it. And you can see why I recommended this weight to be slid closer to the pivot point, because if it was this end, there'd be a whole lot of weight on this end. And when you're setting this up, it's very wise, a jolly good idea to always not have a large amount of weight on one end. The less weight the better. It's a juggling act, basically. So now we're going to move on to the next pieces that actually fit on here. Before we connect the next pieces, we have to remove these bolts here. And again, just like when we secured this bottom bit here, these are best popped in your pocket, because in a minute we're going to be connecting the next pieces, and they are of course secured in place with these bolts. So I undo these, put them in my pocket, and then we'll move on to the next two pieces. So the next thing to find in the kit are these two pieces, absolutely identical, box section steel, and these fit on each of these. Now you will see there is a hole this side, there's no hole the other side. Likewise there's a hole this side and not this side, so the two holes mate up. Yes. Now you have to reach a sort of happy medium where you're supporting it but not too much. If you support it too much, it won't slide on. If you don't support it enough, it will. So you have to find that happy medium where it just slides into place like so. I can then find the bolt, one of the bolts, I put in my pocket, and that just screws in there to hold it in place like so. Now of course what I've done now is to introduce an area at head height. So you need to be very, very aware of health and safety, and that this is at head, indeed eye height, and easy to walk into. Yeah. The next piece, exactly the same. Hole this side, hole that side. The two holes mate up. Support it, but not too much, and it will slide easily into place. Get my bolt from my pocket, and that will actually fit in like so. So you can now see that we've half built the jib arm. I should just mention before I move on that it is possible to move the pivot point. The pivot point will move to here, the pivot point will move to here. If the pivot point moves to here, this becomes the counterbalance, but the actual unit is much shorter. The actual arm then is that long. Yeah. If you move the pivot point to here, then you dispense with these bits, and the other bit I'm going to show you next goes on, so the camera actually goes here. This may sound totally confusing. If you want to move the actual pivot point and use it as different lengths, then you need to see myself, a lecturer, on how you actually move the pivot point. Okay, so the next thing you do to facilitate the final length of the jib arm is to remove, as before, these bolts, and be careful not to lose them on the floor. Pop them in your pocket straight away, ready to secure the next piece, so you know exactly where they are. And just like before, we've got a threaded hole on this side, and the next piece you need to find in the kit is this double box section steel piece. And as with all these pieces, be very, very careful about trapping your fingers, because they will actually close up with quite a force actually. So you need to be very careful about trapping your fingers. You will see in this piece, just like the others, hole this side, yes, and there's a hole this side. So it's probably best to do the bottom one first, and just like the two single pieces we did, they need to be eased on so that you are supporting them but not too much, if you see what I mean. And I would recommend highly that you delegate a friend or part of your crew, one of your crew members, to help you with this. So the bottom one I'm doing first, the second one then will pop into place like so, and I've got my bolt in my pocket to secure it in place. Now obviously there is a whole lot more weight on this end now. It's a constant juggling act with this piece of kit. You would ideally not have a table that end, you would have someone constantly holding that end, supporting that end, and I can now obviously feel I've got quite a bit of weight here. So what I'm going to do is to gently lower this onto the floor, like so. Now if I come back to this end, I can then slide this weight to the other extreme, just to balance the weight a little bit. Obviously you're not going to be balancing it properly yet until you've got a camera on. So the next thing one has to do is to introduce perhaps more weight that end. Obviously the weight this end will be much more because it's a longer arm. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is to introduce the next piece, which is the actual spindle that weights actually go on this end to counterbalance the whole thing. Okay, so we've assembled the large part of the jib arm now. The longest section is, the end of the longest section is placed on the floor there, the end where the camera will eventually go. So that has of course introduced the counterbalance end to be in the air at head height. So if you haven't got a table here, which you probably won't, it's easy to walk straight into it, so it's something to be very aware of. Now the other bit to find in the kit is the actual weight bar. The weight bar fits on this bit with a threaded bolt that just goes down through a hole there, like so, and then a nut that secures it there, like so. So the weights on this particular kit is standard gym weights, disc gym weights. They're 5 kilograms each with a hole in the middle, and they just go over the weight bar. Now of course you will have someone steadying that end. You could well have someone steadying this end, because now you'll see that the weight is far more evenly distributed. So you've not got a huge amount of weight one end, which can be quite dangerous. So it's always best, it's a constant juggling act to keep the weight distributed between the camera end and the counterbalance end. So I'm going to move the actual kit out of the way now, the table, so that I can actually show you the Vista head, the motorized, what they call in the trade a hot head, which is a pan and tilt head. Okay, well, assuming you're going to use remote control pan and tilt, the next thing to find is the Vista head. You don't have to use the Vista head. You can use a bowl that I'll come to in a moment that will accept an ordinary tripod head. But if you want remote control, well, then the Vista head comes folded up like so, and it will undo like so. So you've got a motor there for tilting and a motor there for panning. You'll see it's got four screw holes, 4 holes here to connect it to the plate on the end of the Vista head. When you connect this, depending on the camera, the writing can either be facing outwards or inwards, yeah, depending on the camera, because some cameras the viewer might not be removable, the eyepiece viewer might not be removable, it might interfere with that side, so it can go either way, basically, that way or that way. So you will see that in the kit you've got 4 nuts and bolts, and it's best to part the nuts from the bolts and put them in your pocket ready to secure this to the plate in a moment. You've also got a little spanner to tighten them up. You've also got a knurled nut and bolt, and that actually fits through the slit hole in the plate that accepts your camera. It's not a quick release plate system. It is 1/4 inch bolt, threaded bolt that pops through there, screws into the bottom of the camera, and then the nut tightens up on the plate to secure the actual camera in place. We'll come to that in more detail in a minute. Okay, so to connect this to the camera end of the jib. Okay, so we're at the camera end of the jib arm, and as I briefly mentioned before, you do not have to use the remote control Vista head made by Glidecam. You can actually use this bowl that comes with the kit, 100mm bowl or a 75mm bowl attachment. You'll see that there's a plate here connected with 3 nuts and bolts. If you take those nuts and bolts out, 2 of those bolts will then poke through the assembly there to screw into 2 threaded holes there, so you've got a bowl, a tripod head bowl on the end as opposed to a remote control head. Assuming you're going to be using the Vista head, or hot head as it's called in the trade, that, as I mentioned briefly before, connects with 3 nuts and bolts. I'm sure you will, in fact I would highly recommend that you do not use a table. You have members of your crew holding this steady. You have a member of the crew here, you have a member of the crew the other end, because remember, constantly with this kit the weight changes and you have to counterbalance all the time to make it safe. When I connect this Vista head, and I'm going to have the writing facing outwards, the camera I'm using today works very well like that. As I said before, you could put it on that way, it doesn't matter. When I connect this, obviously there's going to be a lot more weight. Convenience of a table again, I have got nuts and bolts on the table. Normally I would have the nuts and bolts in my back pocket ready to connect. So 1 nut and bolt up through the first hole, like so, with a nut, and once you've got 2 on, you can relax a little bit. There's 1, and the next one, like so. Obviously you'll have lots of crew members, so you'll have someone steadying this as well from below. The third bolt, it's probably best not to tighten those two because the third and the fourth hole might not line up completely, like so. Now I can tell already that there's a heck of a lot more weight this end, so I would be telling my crew members all the weight now is transferred to this end. I'm going to tighten these up like so. And again, with any bits of kit you get out the equipment centre here, it's best to check that all the stuff is there. For instance, a spanner is easily lost. You need to check it's there. So there we are with the Vista head connected in place. A lot more weight there. What I'm going to do now is to go to the other end and put another jib weight on to counterbalance it. So I'm at the camera end still of the jib arm. I put more weight on the other end, so therefore this is now up in the air at a convenient height. It would be a good idea, in your case, delegating a member of crew to steady the other end. Now then, I'm going to attach the camera now to the Vista head. It'll be easier for you to see it if I just pan the pan motor around a bit so it's facing you. The plate where the camera is going to sit with its slit hole there. And as I briefly mentioned before, when I introduced you to this Vista head, this knurled nut and bolt, you keep the nut rather on the bolt and poke it through. That's what I'm going to do. Poke it through there. That's going to screw into the bottom of the camera, and then that's going to tighten up on the bottom of the plate. Yeah. So this particular camera has a 1/4 inch threaded hole and a 3/8 threaded hole. This is obviously 1/4 inch threaded bolt. So poke it through, and I can see where it's going to mate up. It's going to mate up with that 1/4 inch threaded hole in the bottom of the camera. Like so. Screw it all the way in, and then tighten up the nut on the bottom. Not too tight because we've got minor adjustments. In a minute we're going to see if the camera wants to tilt forwards or backwards. It wants to tilt forward at the moment. Remembering now, if I have a person on the other end, remember now there's a lot more weight on this end. The camera has introduced a lot more weight. It's front heavy, so I'm going to slide it back a little bit, like so. And that's fairly balanced. So, I mean, you could set it up so that the camera always goes forwards. You can set it up that the camera always goes backwards, or you can set it up to be fairly sort of level. It doesn't really matter. But we've introduced, as I say, a lot more weight now to this end. So I'm going to gently pop this back down on the table and adjust the weight the other end so that I haven't got all the weight this end yet again. So I'm at the camera end of the jib. I'm going to make connections for the video signal and for the power. I have put more weight on the other end. It's not exactly balanced, but there is a lot less weight. I can pick this up with one finger. If there was no weight on the other end, I'd be struggling to pick it up. First of all, the power connections. The power lead, twin this end, single the other end, multi-pin, single connection the other end. You'll see that there's some identification on the Vista head and these two ends to indicate which is pan and which is tilt. Now this has red tape on, so that'll be the tilt. Yeah. So I can connect that one. It's just a simple 2-pin connection, and then there's a threaded knurled nut that keeps it in place like so. The other one, green tape for the pan, pops in exactly the same way, tightens up like so. Yeah. Now the important thing is here, this is going to be moving, of course, isn't it? So you need a bit of a loop there. You need a bit of a loop so that the cable doesn't strain when you're operating it. I've connected the video to the video cable to the camera. As I'm sure you'll know, there's a whole host of different connections for video cameras. This particular video camera gives me a whole host of connections here. RGB and sound. We just want the yellow one for composite video, which will end up at our monitor. This particular kit comes with a BNC lead, and BNC lead will eventually connect into there. But just for the time being, I'm going to secure, again with a looper cable for the video signal, a looper cable for the power, and there will be, and again you need to check this before taking it out of stores, there will be quite a few rolls of double-sided Velcro, and the double-sided Velcro just pops on like so and secures the video signal cable, the power cable in place. Basically you need quite a bit of this all the way down the arm, basically to the other end. So you have a video signal going to your monitor, which if you're outside the studio can be a field monitor, or if you're in the studio it can be one of the bigger studio monitors. So we carry on like this all the way down through to the other end there. While I'm at this position here, I can go to the other end of the power cable, and the other end of the power cable is a standard 4-pin connection, which, similar to the connections on the Vista head, just pop into that particular socket there, and in a similar fashion secures up on a thread like so. Yeah. Now obviously this is the control box for pan tilt on the remote head. To power this there is a 4-pin XLR. Yeah. And 4-pin XLRs are standard for carrying low voltage, and you can actually operate this from a PAG belt. I'm sure you know what PAG belts are. We've got 3 or 4 of them in the stores. They supply 12 volts from a battery pack that you wear around your waist. They have a 4-pin 12 volt XLR output. You can connect that into there and it will happily operate this particular system. If you're in the studio, well then you have power supply unit with obviously a power plug that I'll plug in very shortly, and a 4-pin XLR that plugs into the unit here to power it. So I'm going to plug this power supply unit into the mains. This would, down at the other end of the jib, this would normally attach to the tripod leg, or it could attach to part of the counterbalance arm to operate this kit. But for demonstration purposes, I'll just plug it into the mains to see the operation of the Vista head, pan and tilt. So plugged in the mains so, and turned on, and we see that if we go left it goes left, if we go right it goes right, if we go down it goes down and up. Yeah. And there is a speed control here, so it'll go quite fast or quite slow, like so. And there's also a sensitivity, how quickly it responds. Yeah. You can see the red light come on there. Now, as I say, the video connection, the yellow cable connected via BNC lead to whichever monitor you prefer. In the studio, a studio monitor; out in the field, a field monitor. And I cannot emphasize enough to keep the weight balanced so that there's not a huge amount of weight on one end, because it makes it potentially dangerous if there is. And to always use it on a flat, firm surface.